This is the story of John Q, a man who, despite being unable to even hold a gun steady, took control of the city's largest hospital. Surprisingly, all the hostages didn't express fear. Instead, they willingly cooperated with him. An initially heroic young man attempted to fight back, ambushing John Quincy Archibald with pepper spray, leading to an immediate struggle. The young man called for help from the other hostages, but a woman, Julie Bird, picked up the dropped pepper spray and sprayed it directly into the young man's face, then delivered a kick to his vital area. The hostages present burst into laughter. A security guard, Max Conlon, even proactively offered handcuffs, allowing John to restrain the young man, Mitch Quigley, by a heating pipe. John then looked around and, seeing an expectant mother, Miriam Smith, who was close to delivery, and a single mother, Rosa Gonzalez, holding an infant, released them safely, concerned for their well-being. Outside, a large number of reporters had gathered. When they saw hostages emerging safely, they rushed forward but were kept at a distance by the police. They shouted questions. What kind of person is the captor? And has anyone been harmed inside? The single mother, Rosa Gonzalez, with her broken English, loudly replied, "He is a very, very good person. He didn't hurt anyone. He helped those in need." Initially, the reporters were skeptical, but later, when John was apprehended, countless people came to see him off, with some directly calling him a true hero in their hearts. Even the police officer, Lieutenant Frank Grimes, escorting him, showed great respect. Not long before this, John Quincy Archibald was a struggling factory worker in Chicago. His only car, used for commuting, had been repossessed because he couldn't make payments. To earn more money and get his car back, he even applied for a job after work, competing with 400 others for the same position, only to be deemed a backup and filed away. Fortunately, his wife, Denise Archibald, was understanding, and his son, Michael Mike Archibald, was kind and adorable, preventing his life from becoming a complete tragedy. However, fate took an unexpected turn. Days later, during a baseball game, his usually healthy son, Michael, suddenly clutched his chest, struggled to breathe, then rolled his eyes and collapsed. Without hesitation, John immediately rushed his son to the hospital. After a series of emergency procedures, Michael's life was saved, but Dr. Raymond Turner, the head of cardiology, delivered devastating news. Michael had a hole in his atrial septum, leading to cardiomyopathy, pulmonary edema, and malignant ventricular arrhythmia. Simply put, Michael's heart was 3 times the size of a healthy child's and unable to pump blood effectively, causing blood to pool in his lungs. Without a heart transplant, he wouldn't live for more than a month. Even if a matching heart was found, the surgery itself carried significant risks. Though reluctant to gamble with his son's life, John firmly chose the option with a 50% survival chance over certain death. Dr. Turner also informed him that due to many patients and few suitable hearts, simply getting Michael on the heart transplant waiting list required a $75,000 down payment, with the total surgery cost reaching $250,000. For an ordinary working-class family like John's, this was an astronomical sum. He was relieved that his factory paid for his insurance annually. However, when John approached his boss, he was told that the factory, to cut costs, had switched to a cheaper insurance provider without notifying him. Now John could only receive a maximum payout of $20,000. Unwilling to accept this, he immediately appealed, and although it was quickly processed and the factory promised compensation in a month, the hospital refused to accept a check that might not clear, only accepting immediate cash. Desperate, John sought help from the Human Resources Department, only to receive a polite, "Sorry, we can't help." Not giving up, John and Denise then went to the government for medical assistance. After queuing for hours, they finally reached the counter, only to be told they were in the wrong place. After transferring and spending most of another day, they finally met with staff, only to be informed they didn't qualify for assistance. Overwhelmed, John loudly questioned, "My son is dying, I'm bankrupt. If this isn't enough, what are your standards?" However, the staff did not answer, only repeatedly apologizing. To make matters worse, Michael's hospital bills had already accrued over $30,000, and if not paid, he would be forcibly discharged. With no other options, John began selling his assets at low prices, and his wife, Denise, continuously borrowed money from others. They managed to scrape together $30,000, but even after paying, the hospital unilaterally issued a discharge notice. Enraged, Denise blamed everything on John. With nowhere else to turn, John decided on a desperate gamble. So on a Saturday when the hospital was on holiday, he found the chief of cardiology on duty. Initially, John still held a glimmer of hope, begging Dr. Turner to treat his son first, promising to find a way to gather the surgery fees later, but after another cold refusal, he suddenly pulled out a pistol, threatening and pushing Dr. Turner into the emergency room. He then sealed all exits with chains, effectively making the medical staff, patients, and security guards trapped inside his hostages. However, having never done anything illegal or threatened anyone with a gun before, John's body trembled, but to save his son's life, he quickly calmed down. He then ordered the security guard to cut off the elevators and smash the monitors with a fire extinguisher. Just as he thought everything was set and he only needed to quietly wait for the police to negotiate, an ambulance arrived outside, bringing a critically injured patient with a severe abdominal wound. Reason told John to refuse entry, but his inherent kindness made him open the door. Since the patient had lost too much blood and couldn't be transferred to another hospital and doctor, Turner was the only doctor available. The cardiologist was forced to perform the emergency surgery. Meanwhile, the police arrived and swiftly surrounded the hospital. Lieutenant Frank Grimes, the lead negotiator, contacted John via walkie-talkie. John stated his demand: find the hospital administrator, Rebecca Payne, and have her put Michael's name on the transplant list, or no hostage would leave alive. Grimes tried to continue speaking, but John, knowing he would try to use psychological tactics, simply turned off the radio. Just then, a commotion erupted in the emergency room. A pregnant woman, Miriam Smith, who was in labor, was not doing well, and her husband, Steve McGuire, was asked to leave by the nurse. Perhaps because he was also a father, John offered words of comfort. He then turned his attention to a couple, Mitch Quigley and Julie Bird. Noticing John's scrutinizing gaze, Mitch spoke first, explaining they had been in a car accident. He claimed his airbag deployed, but Julie's did not, so he only sustained minor scratches, while Julie suffered a broken arm. However, upon learning they were driving a 1986 Mercedes 500, John immediately exposed a fact. Mercedes cars before 1988 did not have passenger side airbags. This implied that Mitch might have deliberately caused the accident, knowing Julie had no safety measures, to get rid of her and find a new girlfriend. He hadn't expected Julie to survive. Mitch panicked but still claimed he was drunk and it was an accident, while others sneered, "Doctor." Turner successfully completed the surgery and the shot patient was out of danger. However, Michael's condition was worsening, forcing doctors to increase his medication. Seeing his small body injected with large amounts of drugs, Denise felt unbearable pain, fearing she would watch her child stop breathing, just like a mother in the adjacent room. On the other side, to replenish everyone's energy, John went to a vending machine. The exasperated Mitch Quigley took the opportunity to hide a can of pepper spray, planning an ambush. When John returned, everyone gathered, eating and chatting like friends. John had a lingering question. Newborns undergo comprehensive checks at birth, so why wasn't his son's enlarged heart detected earlier, leading to this critical situation? Dr. Turner hesitated, hinting that there might not have been a thorough examination, knowing the reason but not wanting to explicitly state it. However, a young doctor nearby couldn't remain silent. He revealed that John's factory's insurance company deliberately paid doctors not to conduct comprehensive examinations to lower costs. Doctors didn't expose this because they received bonuses from the insurance company at year-end. In other words, both parties sacrificed ordinary people's health and even lives for profit. So-called medical ethics were completely disregarded. Hospitals, especially emergency centers, were no longer sanctuaries for saving lives, but centers serving the wealthy. If patients lacked money, they would be turned away. What was even more infuriating was that they were well-versed in the law and adept at exploiting loopholes, thus escaping punishment. Learning the truth, John felt even more strongly that he had to fight for his rights himself. He immediately called the police, inquiring about the progress on the transplant list. Lieutenant Frank Grimes, who answered, said that everyone was tense, and if John could release some hostages, things might proceed more smoothly. John initially didn't want to agree, as it was clearly a threat. However, the female doctor told him that the pregnant woman, Miriam Smith, had a breech presentation, and if not transferred to obstetrics soon, it could result in the loss of 2 lives. Seeing this, John had no choice but to agree to Grimes's request. But to exert pressure, he emotionally roared into the phone, "From the moment I release the hostages, Michael's name must be on the list within an hour, or I will start killing." After saying this, he prepared to send out the pregnant woman and the single mother. However, Mitch Quigley, who had been looking for an opportunity, suddenly provoked Miriam's husband, Steve McGuire, leading to a fight. When John stepped in to intervene, Mitch immediately switched targets, ambushing John and knocking the gun from his hand. He then called for others to help. However, after less than half a day, the hostages had developed trust in John, so no one intervened. Moreover, Julie Bird, the girlfriend who had been hurt by Mitch, severely beat him, causing everyone present to laugh heartily. After fully restraining Mitch, John released the hostages as promised. Meanwhile, the hospital administrator, Rebecca Payne, arrived at the scene. After understanding the situation, she firmly refused to concede, arguing that if such behavior were tolerated, more people unable to afford medical care or their families would follow suit, leading to hospitals nationwide being overrun by thugs. To solve the problem at its root, the medical insurance system needed to be improved. Lieutenant Grimes found himself in a dilemma. His subordinate immediately suggested lying, pretending to agree to John's demands, as he wouldn't know the truth anyway. Although Grimes found this method despicable, with no other options, he followed the administrator to John's wife, Denise. He initially planned to extract information detrimental to John from her, thereby avoiding a lie, but Denise was highly vigilant. She immediately saw through his trick and firmly stated that no matter what happened, she would unconditionally support her husband. She also suppressed her anger and told the administrator that while her actions were detestable, as a devout believer, she would not curse her. However, she asked them to leave immediately and not interfere with her caring for her son. Payne immediately replied, "I have decided to place your son on the list and the hospital will cover all expenses." In an instant, Denise was moved to tears. But Grimes knew this was just a deception. On the other side, as the situation remained stalled, the chief of police, Chief Gus Monroe, fearing John might actually kill hostages, meticulously studied the hospital layout and dispatched a SWAT sniper to enter the hospital through a ventilation shaft. If John entered the target range, he could be shot. Grimes was furious, believing John did not deserve to die, but Monroe retorted, "This is an election year. I will not allow any kidnapped citizens to die on my watch, not even with the slightest risk." It turned out that the chief was not genuinely concerned about the lives of the innocent, but feared any incident during his term would hinder his career advancement. The chief had always been fond of superficial gestures, especially in front of the public and media, disguising himself as a public servant. This was precisely why Grimes disliked him. Alas, the higher rank outranked him, and Grimes's attempts to resist were futile. What was even more infuriating was that due to their disagreement, the chief immediately suspended Grimes from duty and ordered the sniper into position. As the designated phone rang, John was lured into the sniper's line of fire. The caller, unaware of the trap, was his wife, Denise. She told John that Michael's name was on the heart transplant list and had Michael, who had just woken up, take the call. Through the cold receiver, father and son had a moving and heartfelt conversation. But what neither John nor the police expected was that this scene was being broadcast live. It turned out that the police had a hidden monitor displaying John's every move, and this footage was intercepted by a reporter seeking fame, who then broadcast it live. Ironically, John had previously sought help from this reporter, but he had completely disregarded it. As John ended the call and put down the receiver, he realized he was on TV, but before he could react, the sniper, having received orders, fired at him. Seeing John slowly fall on the TV screen, everyone assumed he had been fatally shot. Unexpectedly, the next second he not only stood up but also pulled the sniper from the ventilation shaft and severely beat him. It turned out that John had noticed something amiss before the sniper fired, so he was only wounded in the arm. His fall was merely to make the sniper lower his guard. After a quick treatment of his wound, John, realizing he had been tricked, specifically demanded to negotiate with Grimes. The chief, who had botched the assassination and been exposed to a national audience, could only humbly request Grimes to return to duty. By now, the crowd outside was growing, and shouts of support for John were increasing. Despite knowing there were many guns pointed at him in the dark, John bravely brought the subdued sniper to the door to confront Grimes. Grimes stated, "You have only two paths, prison or death. Do you really think these people cheering for you now genuinely care and support you? They are just here for the show. No one cares about your predicament, and no one cares about your son's health except me. Only by cooperating with me can you hope to get what you want." However, John had completely lost faith in the police. He didn't want to be fooled a second time, so, following his own conviction, he made a demand. "Bring my son, Michael, here, and I will surrender voluntarily, and everyone will be safe." With no other options, Grimes accepted the proposal. As Michael was wheeled over, surrounded by people, night had fully fallen, but the crowd remained large. They watched Michael being taken into the emergency room, and then the sniper was thrown out. But they didn't know that John had already prepared to sacrifice himself, so when Dr. Turner regretfully said that if no new heart transplant was found, Michael wouldn't live for more than 2 hours, John showed no urgency or anxiety. He looked at his son on the hospital bed and calmly replied, "Then take my heart." In fact, John had explicitly stated during his confrontation with the police, "I will never bury my son. Only my son might bury me." At that time, no one understood the meaning of his words, and no one could have imagined that a father would willingly offer his own life for his child. Dr. Turner then, from a professional medical perspective, rejected his idea. The comparison process between donor and recipient is very complex, requiring many important tests such as blood type and chest size matching. Even one mismatch would make it impossible. Unexpectedly, John had already undergone examinations, and his blood type perfectly matched Michael's. But Dr. Turner still refused the surgery because harvesting organs from a living person was tantamount to murder. At this moment, Lester Matthews, one of the hostages, came over to persuade John, saying, "Sometimes a man has to let go and let God take over." But John couldn't do it. No matter what, he wanted his son to live. He then raised the gun to his temple and desperately forced Dr. Turner, "I won't make it difficult for you. I can commit suicide first, and then you can take out my heart and place it in my son's chest. Or you can watch 2 lives disappear one after another." Perhaps moved by his determination, or perhaps simply fulfilling his duty as a doctor, knowing that a precious heart could not be wasted, Doctor. Turner finally agreed to John's request, even if it meant losing his medical license. After writing his will, John asked 2 hostages to witness and sign it. Initially, no one wanted to take the pen from his hand, as it felt more like a blade that would sever John's head once it fell. In the end, Max Conlon, the security guard, and Julie Bird, Mitch Quigley's girlfriend, acted as the seemingly cruel executioners. Just before the blade fell, John removed the armrest supporting his arms to bid his final farewell to his son. "You must listen to your mother and tell her you love her every day because she is the best person in the world to you. You are still too young to have a girlfriend. When you grow up and meet someone you love, treat her like a princess. Do whatever you want boldly, but most importantly, seize every opportunity to make money. Sometimes you have to go against your conscience because money will make your life smoother. Be kind to people, but if someone deliberately provokes you, don't be timid or retreat. Face them like a man. Don't smoke and stay away from bad things. There are many wonderful things in the world waiting for you. Always remember, I will never leave you, and I truly, truly love you." After saying these words, John's tears fell like broken pearls, incessantly splashing on his face. Although Michael was barely clinging to life, he tried hard to remember every word that reached his ears, because they were sounds of love, and love always creates miracles. At the same time, in the inpatient department, a donor list arrived via fax. A doctor, seeing it, immediately ran to the administrator because the donor's heart matched Michael's. It turned out that after watching John's broadcast earlier that afternoon, Dr. Turner was deeply moved by the father-son bond and had indeed entered Michael's name onto the list. Even more incredibly, the current donor, the woman who drove the BMW, had died in a car accident during John's first negotiation with the police. However, John, unaware of this, had once again pulled out his pistol, but to everyone's surprise, only at this moment did he take out a single bullet. Before then, the magazine had been empty. Looking at the astonished crowd, John calmly stated, "From beginning to end, I only ever planned to kill myself." He then lay on the hospital bed, covered with a towel, and raised the pistol to his head. Just as he trembled, about to pull the trigger, his wife's voice came through the walkie-talkie. Denise intended to tell him that a matching heart had been found and would arrive in 15 minutes. But John thought she was trying to convince him to give up, so he decisively cut the signal. Sensing something was wrong, Denise immediately ran through the crowd, rushing to the emergency room door, and desperately shouted what she wanted to say. 15 minutes later, the helicopter carrying the heart landed at the designated spot. All the trapped hostages emerged one after another. The culprit himself, with hands on his head, knelt on the ground, indicating surrender. But as he was put into the police car and driven away, Lieutenant, Frank Grimes realized it wasn't John, but Lester Matthews disguised as him. As for the real John, he had already blended in with the medical team and entered the operating room. However, Grimes did not immediately expose him. In fact, the entire police force, from top to bottom, secretly covered for John, solely to allow him to remain by his son's side, whose fate was still uncertain. Soon, the tense heart transplant surgery began. John and Denise stood outside the partition, anxiously awaiting the verdict. Fortunately, heaven showed mercy this time. Michael's surgery was a great success. With the weight off his chest, John willingly put on the handcuffs. During the period leading up to sentencing, major news media extensively reported on his actions. Public pressure successfully spurred the improvement of government medical assistance policies. 3 months later, John received his sentencing. He was charged with 3 crimes: attempted murder, armed criminal action, and kidnapping and false imprisonment of 11 people. Ultimately, only the 3rd charge was upheld, resulting in a 2-year prison sentence. However, even as a prisoner, in his son Michael's heart, he remained the greatest father. Even those he had held hostage genuinely regarded him as a hero, because it was his courageous actions that exposed the true face of the healthcare system, which had long tormented the lower classes, and at the same time promoted healthcare reform, benefiting more people suffering in dire circumstances.